Good evening and welcome to the Post Cafe. It is where artists come to life. The spoken word brings forth the inner creations of hidden treasures, expressing tones of lyrics felt within the soul, a vibration that brings stories untold. This platform represents artists of all backgrounds, be it writers, singers, spoken word, artistic expressions in painting, literature, poetry, and the journey through life. Mystery seeks to bring new ideas and opportunities through the mind at all levels. Wherefore my time leaving tomorrow on the wings of yesterday where birds fly higher than the mystery of dreams never knew. Why do mellow sounds ring silently without ever leaving memories of my lonely blues? Walk by the calls of nature, sing in harmony, pray for the love of the sky, and dance with the stars like a feminine ballerina, gazing across the stage in her soft-toed ballerina shoes. Welcome to the Arts Poetry Cafe Show, Poetically Speaking, hosted by Terry Benjamin and RONALD C McCray. As delighted as we are, we can't wait to engulf a new wave of presenting this platform to our audience. So, sit back and enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's get started.
This is Poetically Speaking, and this is Terry Benjamin and RONALD C McCray. And as always, we have a special program for you tonight. As a matter of fact, today's agenda is DIY, Do-It-Yourself Independent Authors. And we'll be talking to some independent authors, one you know and one is maybe new to you. But again, we love authors, so we're going to present them in the best possible light. Also, today's the quote of the day is, "The purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it. The meaning of life is to give your gift away." And this is from David Viscott. And again, you have your gift, you develop your gift, and you give your gift away. Because one of the things about writers is that we really, we're here to serve. We're here to bring ideas to you that maybe some of you have thought about and maybe some that you hadn't thought about. But again, I think it's the writer's job, a duty to help us understand life and also to make life better. So again, this is something that we do twice a week. And I want to, just before we get into it, I got a thing off Facebook. And I wanted to share this with you because, you know, we asked why books? And again, this was this thing on Facebook that I found, Ron, and it says here, and I quote, "A book is like a garden carried in the pocket." This is a Chinese proverb. But why books? Well, books help us exercise our mind. Books provide knowledge and information. Books are a good topic of conversation. Books help you better your writing skills. Books improve concentration and focus. Books develop creativity. Books are a window to the world. Books increases your ability to empathize with others. Books introduce you to the unknown fantasy world. Books are good for your memory. Books pose questions to stimulate further investigation. Books reduce stress, put you in a better mood. And I can go on and on. But again, we're about books. We're about conversation. And then as always, we begin our program with Ron's poetry. So Ron, as an independent author, what do you have for us this evening?
Well, I'd like to start out with this because what you just read is interesting. Because, see, books keep you from losing your mind.
Yes.
Just in case if you lose your mind, at least you can listen.
That's right.
Or feel the vibration of somebody else's voice who's telling the story. Because books is history. His story, everybody's story, his or her story.
That's right.
Even a child has a story,
That's right.
no matter how you look at it. But it's interesting because, like you said, books are important.
That's right.
Because, again, everybody may not have a voice, but if you lose your voice, you know that you have a heart, you have a mind, you have a spirit, and you can feel the vibes of the story being told.
That's right.
Silently or out loud.
That's right.
Here I have well, a couple of things, but I just want to read this. Faded dreams.
Faded dreams.
Sitting in a room, looking out the windows at a clear sky, reminiscing about dreams never fulfilled, as thoughts of what is or what was past, by waving at the lost without saying goodbye to the wonders of the crying blues. Sitting in the room, staring into empty space, speaking to yourself, creating a conversation with no real reason, just wondering blues about nothing to hold on to. Only space without substance, and the sun shines on the shades along the walls. Time ticks like a clock, counting the seconds, and the mind becomes distorted by the waves of sound vibrating in the brain, shifting out of sync. And no question is asked as to why I am staring into space. Sitting in the room, I am talking to myself, and my movement has caught my attention. I realize that the space I am staring into is an opportunity to wake up, get up, move in a direction away from a dead zone of emptiness.
Yes.
Or I could potentially lose the chance to gain ideas for fulfilling happiness. Dreams are not illusions of nothing. Instead, they are the title of each blank page without substance written. Thoughts, ideas, images, inventions, lyrics, painting, and much more than the mind can conceive. Count the cost of staring, watching time fade like a wave of air gone without a trace to recount or search for the identity of its whereabouts. A premier feature channel with no knobs to turn, just staring at the same pattern. What caused you to end up in a state of vacant stares without reasons or purpose, just a cup of? Why does one gaze at nothing? And that's so important because, again, as we talked about books.
Yeah.
You know, but if you have everything, you stand into space, that in itself is a book. It's a story, it's a novel, it's poetry. I'm staring into space. But did you pick up the pen? Did you write something? Why are you standing into space? What is your thoughts? Because there's a conversation going on. But who are you talking to and who are you talking about or what are you talking about? See, that in itself, we just gave you the starting point. You see, and our guest today going to lead you right into where you should be.
Right.
But you're sitting there staring into space. The question is why?
Yeah. But for the writer, staring out to space may be part of his or her process, okay? Because a lot of times we get so much into what they say is the real world that we don't understand the world of fantasy. For some of us, can be even realer than the real world.
That's right.
Because, I mean, you get into a poem, you get into a fiction, whatnot, and your heart can start racing because you're excited about this situation. So, again, when we talk about writing, it opens up a whole new world, and that's why I'm so glad to have writers on the program who can really go sort of behind the scenes and let you know what's going on with that. Because, Ron, whenever we have this program and we have your segment, I'm always amazed by your creativity because it's always something new and it's always something different. And like I said, man, I don't know how you do it.
Well, I just haven't lost my mind yet. but you're right. That's what it's all about. It's about listening, feeling, understanding, staring into space. All of those things plays a part.
Yes.
And it comes right back to the question, who am I? And what is my reasons and purpose of being here? Who am I? That right there, I guess, gave you a line. Did you write something centered around it? Sure. Did you look in the mirror and identify who you are?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's sort of arrogant to call ourselves writers because I have a lot of respect for the craft, whether it be poetry, whether it be fiction, I have respect for the craft. And I look at some of the giants in fiction and poetry and whatnot, and I'm saying, wow, could I be in that company? And that's why a lot of times I identify myself as a writer by nature. I mean, I think like a writer. I look at life like a writer. I look at the life that I'm living, but I step back and I look at other people's lives as well. And I look in terms of my story as being their story, as being our story. And that's why, as a writer, when you have an idea, it's precious. And sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drafts to get it where you want it. I mean, it's a certain magic. And I look at the fact of our tools. It's just like music. There's only a limited amount of notes. But as a writer, it's the alphabet. How you put those letters into words and how those words make pictures in the mind of your reader. And it's fascinating to me. Like when I write something, then somebody reads it, and they get the same idea that I meant when I actually wrote it. And I don't ever take that for granted. That is a miracle. That's a miracle.
Absolutely, and that's why the title of my book, We See Colors.
Yes.
And it really outlines exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your thought, images, and you might see and hear the word colors, but colors has a language. It has a story. No matter how you look at it, it changes 1,000 times. And as you said, you can write something, somebody else could write the exact same thing, but have from a different perspective.
Exactly.
It depends on the tone, the mannerism, the spirit of it, the emotional state, and how one's thinking. It doesn't change anything. It just means that each individual took the opportunity to expound on the thought.
That's right. And you say?
You know, and just like with poetry, I mean, we can have a conversation. I can hear something hits me, and I can write something around that. You know, you take an artist who can paint something around that.
That's right. Yeah. And the thing I like about it is that I can give. Let's say we have a title for a poem, and I'll give you the title, and you'll give me the title, and we'll come up with different poems.
Absolutely.
It's just like handwriting. Everybody's handwriting is different.
That's right.
Everybody's voice as an artist is different. And I love that diversity, because one of the things that I like when I read books, I like to read books in the first person, because for me, I feel like I'm that character, whether it be male or female, because I'm reading the first person. I feel that I'm in that person's skin, and it's a beautiful place to be, because again, we only have one lifetime, but in reading, you can have a lot of different lifetimes. And I don't even want to get into the fact about travel, because you can read a book that can take you to Hawaii while you're sitting right here.
Right.
So I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and that's why I think to call yourself a writer is to say a lot, and really I think it's a responsibility, and that's why I think that independent writers are even more precious to me, because you have to do more or less for yourself. And that's why this program is entitled, today is a DIY, do it yourself, independent writers. And again, and we really want you to really listen closely to what we have to say tonight, because there may be a lot of writers out there who are waiting for somebody to put them on, but realize that within you have the ability to publish your own book, to be the self-published writer, to get your book out there instead of waiting for someone else. Because sometimes waiting for someone else could be a missed opportunity. And that's why I love independent writers. They do what they do because they have validated themselves. Sometimes we need somebody to validate us. I know when I was 9 years old, I told Mom I want to be a writer. I didn't have any validation for that, but I made up my mind. And that's why I love independent writers. They have made up their mind to share their gifts with the world.
And you know, what's interesting along that same line, which is so true, independent writers, whatever, and too many have fear that their works or their book may not, you know, excite somebody else. But when you go to a bookstore or a library, you see everybody's book. I don't care what it looks like, how it sounds, whatever. You even catch book with hell on it. Doesn't matter. But then you have books with heaven on it.
That's right.
Everybody has a story. Your voice is your works. That's your book. That's your image, no matter how you look at it.
That's right.
But matter of fact, let me say this. There's two people.
Please,
I met this young lady, and, you know, I was telling her about the show, and she said, oh, I'm excited, you know, because I have a lot of information with books. I said, how much you have? She said, I have enough to write 5 books. I said, when did you start?
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, no. I hate that.
Well, and then all of a sudden, you hear all the excuses. That in itself is a book. Excuses. Book of excuses. I started one. I mean, I got other stuff. I have another friend of mine, you know, he always speaking poetry, tell me what I can say or do, but he can express something in poetry, and I said, did you put it down? Well,
Yeah, that's like the person said, well, you know what, I'd like to write a book. Well, write it. And then here's what they say, someday.
Right.
And let me tell you something. This is our community who are watching us on a regular basis. You know, look, I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I don't know when is someday. I don't know when someday is. And you probably don't know either. So again, my whole thing ain't about writing. You got to sit down and do it. You know, don't talk about it, be about it. And that's from Busta Rhymes.
and you know, I always say that. First of all, we always talk about the art of conversation.
That's right.
Just what we're doing now. We're having a conversation. Art of conversation. We're inspiring you, and you inspire us. But let me say this in short. Jesus wrote in the sand. Took him 5 seconds to write something in the sand, and all of a sudden, everybody that was gathered around scattered. That in itself is a book. That's poetry. That's poetry. And then I don't care if it's the Prophet Muhammad. You know, he wrote something on the Kaaba. Or Moses, he wrote something with the tablets or whatever. The bottom line is just like you said.
Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
That's what we're waiting for. The book is not going to write itself. Believe me. It's so funny when people go to the movies. They see this movie on a big screen, and they don't think that it had to be a director, it had to be a writer, there had to be people behind the scenes and that kind of. It didn't just explode on the screen. There was a lot of things going behind that, and so again, especially in this particular episode, we're going to go behind the scenes. And again, we're going to give you some tips, especially for those writers who are waiting for someday. Someday is today.
And that's what we just talked about when I was just reading something a minute ago about staring into space. You stare into space, but you get a book with blank pages on it.
That's right. Yeah.
And like you said, which is true, there's thoughts and ideas, but at some point, something has to be on those pages.
That's right.
You can't have a book of blank. Well, I'm going to sell my blank book. Well, you know what? That's true, because it can be a diary, which means no matter how you look at it, somebody has to put their story, because I have one.
Yeah.
And the title of that, had it not been for, where will I be? Where will I be had it not been for?
Yeah. But your book is a journal, which means that those blank pages have to be filled in.
That's right.
Okay? And whether you call it a journal or
That's
whether
right.
you call it a diary or whatever, sometimes this is where stories begin.
Yep.
And so at this time, we want to bring on a special guest, a young man that I met some time ago, and I told him, I said, you got to come on the show. I read he has 2 books that he's published. I said, well, I had the opportunity to read both books, and I'm excited about sharing him with you this evening. And Ron is going to introduce our guest this evening.
Yes. And I'm going to say this. Matter of fact, our guest this evening name is Ben CHEWEY. And as we always said, he's an author, he's a writer, producer, filmmaker, everything else. but he gonna tell you the story. But in all seriousness, we always consider our guests as brothers and sisters because we become family. We're not strangers, we become family. So let me just read you a little bit of his bio. And anything that I mess up, and we try not to, but we raw and straight up. But he's going to make correction on all of that.
That's right.
Ben CHEWEY, I've been inspired by the wisdom of family, the guidance of teachers, and the cultivating narrative spun by author Stephen King, Frank Herbert, George R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Neil Gaiman, and J.R. Tolkien, and if I pronounce it, he'll correct it if I pronounce it wrong. Mr. CHEWEY works in education and has a master's degree in Holocaust and genocide studies and has done extensive work with Cranford TV 35, a local TV station, and has done some voice work project. So you're going to listen from the brother. Like I said, he's family. So no matter how you look at it, if you need somebody with a voice makeover, you need to be interviewed or whatever, this is the man. So here we are today.
Good evening, my brother. We can give you a applause, because again, what you have done in really a short time if you created some works, and I know you're going to create some more. But I guess my first question to you is, what is the advantage of being an independent writer?
Well, one advantage I would say is that you can decide what you want to write. You don't have to write what the algorithm says or what the trends say. So definitely a bit more freedom to it than if not so independent.
Yeah, and my next question to you is, when did you decide to become a writer?
I would say officially at college. I've only written very little recreational stuff before college, but in college you're exposed to the professors and the environment and all that. It's like, oh, in this context it's not so bad, and so it took a bit longer, but I'm like, I could actually write a book. So after a few trial and error things, I ended up with a few books published.
Okay. And the thing that I love about is the fact that you sort of went on, because a lot of times we look for other people for validation, and sometimes we make a mistake of showing people some of our earlier work or earlier drafts, and their reception might be underwhelming. They might say, like, what, you think you can be a writer? But sometimes that first draft is just the beginning. And in your case, again, you have 2 published books. And I'm just going to mention those briefly. We'll get more in depth later on in the program. But just as a way of introduction to you and what you're doing, now your first published book was called American Tango. And really it's a story, and I'll read from the back here, and you can elaborate. It says here, the story of a reunion between old friends, Kevin Summers and Allison Winters, as they meet in an unexpected encounter after not seeing each other for 16 years. This is a story about first impressions, second impressions, and friends versus lovers. It describes the reality of grasping dreams in the modern world, understanding one another, and figuring out what makes a person truly happy. And again, and I tell you, Ben, I read your second book first, and then I discovered that you had another book out. And I said, well, let me read this book as well. And I tell you, when I read this book, I still love the second book, but this book really knocked me out. Just in terms of the way you develop the characters, the way that you develop the situation. Now, what I'd like you to do is just briefly, what made you write this book, American Tango?
Let's see, I was rewatching that movie Garden State. If you know that one was Zach Braff and Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I remember that book. Yeah.
And that one was about Zach Braff's family member died, came home, he saw Natalie Portman's character, and he was going through some stuff trying to find himself, and it was different in that movie because Natalie Portman and him had never met before then. But for my story, it was like, there's been other countless stories, movies and whatnot about childhood friends who haven't seen each other in a while. So I was inspired by that kind of situation. Life doesn't always turn out as we hope for, and especially when people we haven't seen since childhood, and sometimes that's the most drastic way of realizing how much has changed. And so I was inspired to write that. During the pandemic, I had a lot of free time, so that's when I finished the story. And one thing came to another, and I made it to the finish line. Yeah.
Now, when you were writing this, did you have a routine? Did you write every day or every other day? Or what was the routine?
I set a few hours in the afternoon and late at night to write some books, some chapters, some words. I usually write right before I go to bed. Okay. And I guess less distractions that way. And and so it seems to work. I was able to get all my projects done like that. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about it, and I want our community, those who watch us, I want you to know that there are books and there are manuscripts. Okay, a manuscript is what you write before you write a book. Okay, a book is a full production. A manuscript is really, for me, is the beginning. And I know for myself that when I write, I usually write with a pen on paper. And then I go to the computer and that type of thing. And so as part of your process, you were able to put this together and you came up with American Tango. And then your second book was called Blood Oath of the Patriots. Now, this is more like an action adventure type book. And my question to you is, how did this come about? What was the origin of this book?
Well, it was after a certain riot at a certain event and a certain family member's reaction to that event.
Uh-huh.
And I'll just say how horrified I was to see that event, that family member's reaction. So I'm like, well, I can't do too much about that because he's just too far gone. But maybe I can write about how it feels to, someone you used to admire suddenly go down turn to the dark side or just go crazy and all that. So I thought about it. I took inspiration from a few things like that show Homeland.
Oh, yeah.
And 24 and a few other things. And I came up with Blood Oath of the Patriots, Kelly O'Neill and her brother Malcolm O'Neill. And, she was in the war on terror and she came home, she thought she was done for it, done with all that. She found out the hard way that some of her problems came home with her. And I'll just say it gets pretty intense pretty fast.
Yeah, because your book actually deals with what they call homegrown terrorists. Again, you go overseas to fight a war, and you come back, and you realize that there's terrorists among us.
Yeah.
But I just want you, just for our readers, just to describe your main character. Because one of the things that I also find interesting, as writers, we have to write about men and women in a way that people believe us.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about your book is that your main character is a female, but it was so well written that I didn't think about a man who wrote this. I thought that this was a really good character. And my question to you is, how would you describe this character and how do you come up with this character?
Conflicted, to say the least. Someone who cares about, her oaths, obviously, and her country and all that. Because, I'm not giving too much away. Both her and her brother were inspired by their grandfather, who was a World War II vet.
Yes.
So she wanted to join the army after her brother could not because of a traffic accident. So she became fictional, of course, but she became successful in the military. Her brother became resentful of that.
Yeah.
And so she didn't think it was too big a deal till she came home for real, not just, a small break from the action. And there was more of a conflict than she realized. And I guess that's all this whole story is about, how you deal with people who have become twisted by the resentment and hatred. And can you save them? And if you can't save them, what do you have to do? Because,
that's the interesting thing, because you have people in the same family, but in terms of their politics, it's like they're separate. Yeah. And how do you resolve it? And maybe you don't resolve it. But again, it's something that needs to be dealt with. But the thing is that I love the conflict. I love the story. And the last question that I want to ask you before we go on is, I love that character.
Thank you.
I love the character. And my question is, are you thinking about doing a sequel to this first book? I mean,
I won't rule it out, but I admit I have to wait a bit to see how the state of the world is, because obviously, if I write it a certain way and then it turns out that we're not that country anymore. We don't have that anymore. Like, I might want to wait just a little bit to see the state of things, to just see what kind of setting we'll have to write it in.
Okay. Well, like I said, but you mentioned in your opening remarks about 24.
Yeah.
That TV show. I guess that was one of my favorite shows, like forever.
Still the rescue Jack Bauer from Russia.
Yeah. I mean, Kiefer Sutherland, Jack Bauer. I mean, it's a thing where, I was at the edge of my seat in the way that they had it, the way they did it in terms of like everything happens in 24 hours, and again, it was that push. I mean, everything is going on, and again, it's almost breathless. And before I go on, I just want to acknowledge some of the people who have tuned in tonight to watch the program. Richard Medley says, "Good evening, God bless." Oh. Robert Cabbage-Stalk is watching, and Richard and Robert, they've been with us from day one. And so I really like that they're with us, and I'm liking that they have a chance to meet you, Ben. And so I want to go into another segment, and then we're going to have a big discussion about independent writers. But I want to start with 2 books. And this is the Mind, Body, and Book segment. And I always say that as writers, we really need to be readers, because I think the more you read, the more you expand your imagination and also your craft. Because again, you can have a lot of good ideas, but if you don't put them down the right way, they're just not going to work. And so we have an idea of craft, and I read different books because I want to learn my craft. One of my old friends, I met this woman a long time ago. I met her when she wrote her first 2 books, and her name is Donna Hill. And this book that I have here is Confessions in B flat. And at this point, Donna Hill has written almost 100 books in different genres. And when I met her, she was writing romance novels. And I read her first novel, and I was really impressed. It was called Rooms of the Heart. Then I read her second novel. I said, man, this is pretty good. And I had the audacity to reach out to her publisher. And at this time, I was teaching at Union County College in Plainfield. Make a long story short, I called the publisher, and I said, is it possible to get Donna Hill to come to Plainfield? And I want to host at the Plainfield Public Library and talk about her book. And so she came in, and we did a nice program at the library. And afterwards, we wined her and dined her. We took her to a nice French cafe for a nice dinner, and we've been in communication ever since then. And this book right here, Confessions in B flat by Donna Hill, will soon be a movie. As a matter of fact, yeah, Sherry Shepard has brought the rights to this book. So look for this, Confessions in B flat, a novel by Donna Hill, soon to be a major motion picture. Okay, this is fiction. I do believe that as writers and readers, we should develop what I call a habit of literacy. And when I say habit of literacy, it's going beyond reading and writing. I say that if you, and I tell my students when I was teaching at different colleges and universities, I said if you want to be an A student, you should do 5 things every day. Read, write, talk, listen, and view. And if you do these 5 things, you'll be a better student. But again, I believe that you'll be a better writer. And what I said to my students, you should read 2 books a week, a fiction book and a nonfiction book. So this is my fiction book. My nonfiction book is a book called Compelled to Scribble. And this is by Clinton Miller Jr., who is a friend of mine. Okay? And he wrote this book. I've known him for many, many years. We're very close and whatnot. And then this is from the back of the book. He says here, in this inspiring and heartfelt story, the author invites his readers into his remarkable journey, which spans the globe and the depths of the human heart. As a Christian minister, he shares the experiences of his passion for serving others and shines a spotlight on what he has dedicated his life to, which is spreading faith, hope, and love to everyone who crosses his path. This book promises to touch the hearts and souls of his readers as he demonstrates resilience in the face of profound personal loss. After the passing of his beloved wife, he faced the pain of grief, yet chose to embrace healing, finding strength in his faith, and the knowledge that his mission is to serve others far from over. This book is a testament to a life well lived, to the joy of giving, and to the enduring belief that no matter the challenges we face, we are called to make a difference. And again, I mean, this is my friend, this is my brother, we belong to the same church, but this book, I said, when I read the book, I said, I thought I knew you. I thought I knew you. And he has some things, and to say this book is candid is an understatement. This man bears his heart in this particular book. And I said, man, you know, I got the book the night before, and I sat down to read it. I said, I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then I'll go about my business. He messed up my whole morning, like you do sometime. And I had to sit down, I had to finish the book. And I tell you, man, after I finished the book, man, I said, wow. I said, wow. But again, we all have books inside us. Not everybody's going to bring it out, but those who do, those who have the courage, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or poetry, I mean, it's your gift. I think God gives us gifts to share. Les Brown says that we should die empty, which means that all your gifts, all your ability should be released in the service of mankind and humanity. And community, those who are watching, those who are listening, I am in the company of giants tonight. And I'm not saying this because it sounds good. I'm saying it because I have two young men with me. He's a young man too. Two young men with me who really are going to talk about what it means to be an independent author and also what it means for you to step into the arena. I mean, I want to have you come on and talk about your book. Laretha Foster Bram says, good evening. Good evening, Laretha, another one of our day ones. And gentlemen, I have some questions and you have some answers. I'm just going to open it up, because again, I think you both have so much to offer in terms of being independent writers. Like Ben said in the beginning, he said, one of the advantages of being an independent author is that you write what you want to write when you want to write it. Now you're not ruled by someone's idea of what you should write. And I guess my first question to Ben and to Ronald, and I'll start with Ronald and I'll go to Ben. We talked about the advantages of being a independent author. Is there any disadvantages, Ron?
Yeah, you don't do nothing. You don't do nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and you're right. Matter of fact, let me just say this in
Please,
5 seconds.
Yeah.
But the book you just read, in reference to introducing the author, the friend of mine. See, here's, as I said last time we was on the show, a personal friend of mine who had lost his wife. And so the importance of a legacy, the memories, the emotional state, to be able to express what's inside, to get it out, because somebody is always going through the exact same thing, but nevertheless, it's never the exact same. But to be able to listen, to read, to help somebody grow and recover from this dark space of despair, because that's why we're here.
Right.
Art of conversation,
so. Yeah.
Writers, poets, no matter how you look at it, novel, fiction, no matter how.
Whatever.
Our brother here as our guest. And matter of fact, he said in the beginning, he said, when the question was asked, what inspired, how to get started? He said a little here, a little there, write something here, write something there, but have you written anything? And that's what's important. So again, the disadvantage is not doing anything. You can have all the thoughts you want. But who you telling it to, and who you going to lead the story? Like we already know, even this podcast is forever. But if you don't put anything down for somebody, I don't care if it's 100 generations from now, but somebody will read your story. That's where archaeological, discoverers come into play. They find something, they find history, they find carving, they find pictures, they find images, they find something, and they tell the story about it.
That's right.
That's what's important.
That's important. And going you to Ben, so we talked about the advantage. What are the disadvantages of being an independent writer?
Well, there is a thing that you don't have as many publishing options unless you're already pretty rich. 'Cause, that's the thing. You can have a TikTok and Instagram and all those various things they have, but if no one knows who you are, then very few will go to them. So it's the catch-22. People need to know about you most of the time before they'll pay attention. Or you could pay for that, but again, you need the money to support that a lot of the time. So it could be tricky at times to figure out.
Yeah, because it takes money to actually publish a book.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I want to share with the audience and also share with my authors here, I was reading an article and they said, and this is some real stuff. They were saying that for the average independent writer, they say really the copies sold are really from 100 to 500. That's it. And the thing, what happens, I think, with a lot of independent writers, okay, you have your book. It's published now. But then what? Okay? I mean, you're not James Patterson. I don't think anybody's James Patterson. Matter of fact, I think James Patterson is more than one person because every time I turn around, he has a new book out. But he has a system. He'll write an outline, and outline is detailed, and he'll get another writer to write that book, and it puts on James Patterson with so and so. Okay, James Patterson. That's the drawing card. We all know who James Patterson is. We might not know who the other person is behind that title, but that person, unless it's the Alice Cross series, you find James Patterson with so and so. And what happens is that he has this big machine behind him, and the thing is that he has a situation where, first of all, he's published by a big publishing company. They have the resources that you two don't have. Okay, I've even seen commercials for his books on TV. Okay, they have book trailers. Now you two don't have that. Okay, so my question to you is, start with Ben and go to Ron. How do you market yourself? Because obviously I know you have limited resources, but how do you get the word out about your books and what you're doing?
Network where you can. Go on radio shows. Go on people streaming, podcasting. It's like the other problem is it's not something you can live off at the most of the time. You have to do your day job, so you can't devote all your time as long as you want to keep eating and having electricity. I guess it's a juggling act of finding a balance of doing what you can to try and spread the word and still being able to eat and all that. Yeah.
How about you? How do you get your word out? How do people know about your book?
It's the exact same thing. Whether it's this podcast or it's giving out cards, whether you are at different events, the independent book event, no matter where you're at, or even just in a conversation, and somebody asks you, and you say, okay, yeah, I have this and have that. And you're right, and the brother's right, One of the things I've learned, too, in short, you see, when there's a platform that somebody want to control, they pick and choose who is good and who isn't good. It doesn't say anything that James Madison or whoever or any author is not good, just that somebody gave the opportunity for him to have the spotlight. There are so much treasure. We are treasure waiting to be discovered. But if we don't get it out there and put it out there, nobody cannot discover us. An archaeologist, that's what he or she does. They look for hidden treasure. Matter of fact, last week we was at a Men's Day event, and a young brother, he was 13, he said he wanted to be an archaeologist. And I said to him, well, it starts on the inside. Discover who you are on the inside, because that's where the treasures are. But until somebody hear his voice and say, look, we can do this, I can help you. Because like you also indicated, you have other people who also participate and help bring everything to light.
And let me take it to another level. There's a gentleman named Jason Wilson, and he writes books about black men. And again, his and this is where you make your money. Aretha Foster Bram says, one way to get the book out is networking. But another way, and this is key, because for the average independent author, you're limited how many books that you can print. Okay? So what happened, your print run maybe might be 100 books, 200 books. That is nothing. In terms of, let's say, for example, Jason Wilson, he's written like 3 books. Okay, his latest books. Okay, a book called Battle Cry. 108,000 copies. Okay. His latest book, 7,000 copies sold. Okay, the more copies he sells, the more people know about it. The bestsellers list, and people don't realize this, okay? The bestsellers list, the New York Times bestseller list, is not based on books sold, it's based on books ordered. If I order 500,000 copies of your books, that's a bestseller. That doesn't mean I'm going to sell 500,000, but those are 500,000 books that are actually produced. As an independent writer, you can't do that. When I had my publishing company, the most I did was 1,500 books. And when they came, it was like maybe 10 boxes, because what happened, I would publish my books in Canada because it was cheaper there, and then they would come delivered to the house. But that's 1,500 books. And even with that, I definitely couldn't make a whole lot of money. I couldn't rich. But the thing is, the more that you publish, of course, the more that you can sell. unfortunately, with independent writer, you have one book out. Between that first book and that second book, that may be a 2, 3, or 4 year gap. Okay, and then you got the second book out, and then you go to different places and whatnot. People know about that book, and then they ask, when is the next book? Well, like Ben said, look, I got life. I got school. I got family. Right. I got to put food on the table. I got to pay the rent, the lights, and that kind of thing. Most independent writers are not full-time writers. Most independent writers, I know when I started my career, basically I made more money teaching than publishing books. It was quiet as it's kept. And so what happens is that you have to do something else. There's very few writers, except for James Patterson, who write full-time. That's his full-time job. Most writers that I know, especially independent writers that I know, they have to do other things. They teach. They do other things. I'm going to go back to you, Ron. Now, again, you call your books your babies, okay? So you have 1, 2 babies. But I know this man because, we're personal friends and whatnot. I know he has other books. As a matter of fact, since we started the program, he's been writing books. And my question to you is, when is the next book coming out? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I'm already behind time. I'm already behind. But, the whole thing is, and this is no excuse, but just to give you a little, justifiable reason is that, when you have, especially when you're dealing with electronic, the computer works, it doesn't work, you print out, you can't print out. But what's important is that I have pieces of paper, you write all your information down, you have titles, and I come with something different. So that in itself is, I'm prepared. It's putting together, and like you said, put it together and put it out there. And here, just like every business corporation, Amazon has a shelf full of everybody's stuff. But it also has a warehouse full of everybody's stuff that you have not seen yet or heard. It's just like a store. You go to a grocery store. You may see the same thing, but they only put out whatever depends. And you come and think it's something new. Other countries are far advanced, writers, poets, inventors, whatever. They have so many things constantly. So even though I'm trying to make a living to pay the bills or whatnot, I'm trying to get one product out there for people to see, because if you put all the product out there, now you got a whole garbage can full of everything sitting around. But that's not what it's all about. It's about you doing one thing at a time. Once people know who you are and get a feel of you, and they say, "Whoa, wow," like you always say, "I want more." Here's the next one. Here's the next one. Now you start to see the flow of your income and your popularity, and the light gets even brighter.
And in your case, Ben, I know that you're still in school. And my question to you is, how is what you're doing going to help your writing career? Is there any correlation?
Well, if I have more money, so I can have more time to
more money, more books.
But my first master's was in history. This current one is in library arts, and it's more access to books, more ideas, because I read a lot to get ideas, especially because I don't want to write something and people are like, that other guy wrote that book that's just like your book. I like his cover better. Well, I wish I knew that before. But it's to expand, your awareness, your capacity, and all that. Like a big thing is, because you're probably aware too about the AI and how.
Oh yeah, please, yes.
There's whole Amazon and others have AI writers now, and it's just like, it's the Pandora's box of the these people are like, we don't need people, we'll just have AI to replace everyone, and then. Well, no one will have jobs, but I'll have all the money, so I'm happy. But, but where does that leave us? I don't think we have an answer to that yet, but let's hope it's a good answer.
And the thing is, and it's so funny, because sometimes I like when I find errors in books, because I know it's written by a person. Because AI is perfect, okay? There's nothing, there's no mistakes in AI. But I want to really get to know an author. I want to know that a person wrote these books, not a machine, not AI. Okay, I write a daily music blog. That's me. Okay, I write that every morning. I get up and sometimes I might put 3 articles out there. and I've maybe written 10. I've just maybe 3 at a time and that kind of stuff. But the point I'm making is written by a person.
Right.
But Ben, my question to you, and the same thing as go to Ron, is what? How would you describe yourself as a writer? What are you related to one genre? I mean, do you want to? Because I know you're writing fiction. Do you want to write poetry? Do you want to write screenplays? I mean, are there any limits on what you can do and what you want to do?
Well, I wouldn't mind writing a movie adaptation one day.
Look out! Look out!
Yeah, it's like, well, American Tango is more of a romance. That's
Yes,
what I would
yes.
call Patriots is more of a tragedy thriller. You'd say I have plans for a science fiction series that I actually already wrote it, and I wrote probably enough so it could be 6 books. I'm just trying to figure out how to trying to get the first ideal one so that it succeeds, so I can get the rest of them out there and do the whole Star Wars, Harry Potter theme park kind of thing going on. I have ideas for a few other books. One about a guy who has to go to the Bermuda Triangle because it's the only place he can find a job. And then it turns out the company gives it as a cruise ride. And then someone dies and they find out, wait, they're not taking us their job. They're just getting rid of undesired people in a, kind of a bleak, dark comedy kind of thing. Like what happens when so many people are not needed. The dark outcomes kind of thing. And another idea I had for a book is, this one's a bit more out there, but it's about someone at the end of his rope. You ever watch Bruce Almighty?
Of course, yeah.
It's like think like that, but instead of more of a serious take, like, what if you somehow got the power of God? Would you change the world, and would you be able to, not go mad at power? And I haven't written fully. I haven't started writing yet. I'm still figuring out how to make it, not too preachy, not too out there. And it's just, but that, a lot of people need to know these days, like, well, if I had the power to change things, could I do it, or would I just, use it for myself, or would I actually help people?
Well, see, that's the thing. And again, I find that, at this point, you can't go too far out.
Yeah.
Okay, because again, I mean, I look at our current political situation, and I tell you, if I wrote that, you would say, no, this is too much. We never had that situation, but it's here.
Yeah.
But it's here, and we can go beyond that. As a matter of fact, Octavia Butler, the parable of the sower, it is talking about what's going on right now, and this was written many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And my question to you, Ron, is like, where do you see your career going for? Are you going to write? You're going to stick with poetry? You're going to write fiction? You're going to write journalism? What do you see yourself down the road?
And that's a very, very valid question, because one of the things I often thought about that, and I think it's when you put something together, you leave it up to somebody else's from their vision and how they see it. They say, look, we can use this piece, we can use that piece, we can put it into a fiction or movie, whatever. For me, it's centered around poetry. Now, somebody may extract something from that or whatever, but that's the flow of my vision, how I see it. Just like the brother said here, putting something into a film as you asked a question. That's from his perspective. Everybody has things from their perspective. I'm not going to jump out and say, well, I want to see mine in the film, because that may not be me. But it doesn't mean that somebody else may not say, hey, we can use this piece here. Now, we went from poetry, from my room or staring out in the window, to somebody else's platform, and now you see it on film. What's that movie with Janet Jackson?
Poetic Justice.
Yes, exactly. So there's different pieces. You have rappers in there, you have singers, you have artists, you have actors. No matter how you look at it, everybody has a part. But as you indicated, and also as, and as the brother was saying, you got to have something in your hand to put out there for somebody else to see it, because every single thing, our thoughts, is what somebody looking for. They always look for something new.
That's true, and the thing is, and just before I go back to Ben, just Poetic Justice, that was with Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur. I don't know if you realize, but in that particular film, the main character, Justice, as played by Janet Jackson, she was a poet. And quite as kept, the poetry in the movie was the poetry of Maya Angelou. Okay? So they actually put that into that character. And so what happens is that I think our work can be used in different ways. And Ben, I'm the same question for Ron. Ben, what would you say to aspiring writers? What advice would you give them? Because a lot of people want to do the writing, but they just sort of held back. But what would you say to somebody say, I would like to write a book. I would like to write a poem. What would you say to that person?
Let's see. I have 3 key things.
Yes.
Know your target audience for each book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're doing a romance, don't write to someone who wants to see an action,
Yes.
and vice versa.
Uh-huh.
I would recommend planning out your story. I know some people can wing it, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, for me, it's always helpful to know where you're going so you don't get stuck. I've seen many people hit those roadblocks, and we're still waiting for Game of Thrones.
That's right.
So, and I guess the third one is, if you're not good at the grammar stuff, make sure you know someone who is good at that. 'Cause, I admit, storytelling is, I never have writer's block, but the grammar stuff holds me up, and I would say it really depends on if you can have a good person that can have your back with that kind of stuff. If it's not your strong suit, I mean, if you can do all of it, well, that's of course better.
That's good. But you know, but even with that, okay, I'm a retired college professor. I know all the grammar and that kind of thing. But even with that, I like an editor because the editor can see things that I might miss. Because I think with all writers, whether they be fiction or poet, you sometimes you're just too close to the work.
Yeah.
You're too close to the work where you can't see. And it may be just a grammatical thing. It may be something in terms of spelling, a spelling error, that kind of thing. So I think you need to have someone who's a little removed from what you do. And the same thing with you, Ron. What would you say to aspiring poets and writers? What advice would you give them?
What I would give is what I've learned and what we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you have? Let's do it. Do it now. And this way you instill in the energy in that person to give them confidence. Say, well, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Write one word. Write one sentence. Write something. And as I said to you before, or the audience, even when I put a CD together, I wrote something when I was in school, I put something together, and I went to a friend of mine who had since passed away. I said, look, I'd like to hear myself. You see? So even if you don't hear yourself, but it's important to have somebody who can read it and they give you some feedback. I read one line. He said, I got something. All of a sudden, the music was behind it, and that was my first child. You don't know until you open up your mouth and say, this is what I have. And then here, a child does the same thing. A child comes and say, Mommy, Daddy, this is what I wrote, or this is what I drew. And the moment you say, you scar that child. But even as an adult, you want to inspire somebody, because every single one of us started someplace. Even the best of the best have people edit and rewrite grammar, no matter what it is. But the point is, you want to put your story on the table.
And one of the things that I, as you know, just sort of way of wrapping up the conversation, and I just want to, and it's so funny because a lot of people say that writing is lonely, and it is somewhat lonely because you write by yourself. But when you birth your book, it's a collaborative effort, because again, you have to have somebody to design the cover, and the cover is the front and the back. Okay. And then you got to get somebody getting here to design the interior design. And one of the things, from your book, your first book, you say here, acknowledgement. You say here, this novel would not have come to be without the support from my parents, my grandparents, and many of my teachers who inspired me to see writing as something I could accomplish. I also want to thank Renee Smith and the rest of the staff of the Independent Authors Publications for giving me a chance. Thanks for everything. And again, so what happens, your book is a collaborative effort. And again, my question to you is, I met you at the Independent Writers Expo, and we have another one coming up very, very soon. But my question to you, Ben, is why was that expo important to you as a writer and as an independent writer?
Helping network and opportunity to meet more people and hopefully sell my book, and it was a great opportunity, so I'm grateful for that. It's sometimes it's the small things that you don't seem big at a time, but then have a chance to grow into things. I mean, that's how I met you, and that's how we're here. So
it's full circle, you know.
yeah,
And again, and so that and it's so funny because I think sometimes we overlook that section called acknowledgments, and I think again we have to give credit where it's due. And so, Ron, I want to go back to you and why are acknowledgments so important?
You know, it's interesting, and again, our guest also said the exact same thing. It's because it's really helping somebody fulfill either their fear, their shyness. It sparks a little joy in their life, and that's what it's all about. How can we lift someone else up? Doesn't matter if you're struggling. The point is, do they feel confident enough to know that somebody's there to care to help us through this situation? Everybody, I don't care how good you are, because when you went out the best like a Tom Cruise, you have stunned people.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying? You need we all need each other, and that's what's important. And so, even very quick, as the guest mentioned, even when I first went to I was told about the independent book. I went there, you know, I had my little information, but you think that others are better than you. And what I've learned is that speaking with some others and even reaching out for some support, I was irritated because you can get some negative response telling you what you can do this. I didn't know what to do. So it's all important about how do you reach out with a positive, positive approach and a positive attitude to help somebody regardless if they're struggling.
Yeah, because in the final analysis, writing is a lonely profession, but you have to understand that there are people who are also writing, and that's one of the purposes for this program, to let people know that there are other fiction writers. There are all the poets, publishers, essayists, music journalists, and that kind of thing, and we're all part of this community. Right. And I think it's less lonely when you notice somebody else doing what you're doing. I would have perished if I didn't have an outlet for my creativity, whether it be school newspapers, whether it be college magazines, whether it be independent publications, whatever, whether it be public platforms. We need outlets for our creativity. And as we go through this program, it's called Poetically Speaking for a reason. This is the place for the spoken word. And the spoken word can mean different things. I was telling my brother here, we're in the point now where we have audio books that were never books. Back in the day, you had a book and then you have an audio book. Today, sometimes it's just an audio book. It was never a book. And so with that brings a lot of different creativity, because now you have to have the music, you have to have the narration, you have to have the production. It's almost like publishing a TV show, but also in the audio format. And so again, in our community, those who are watching, listening, and whatnot, we thank you for being the audience for what we do. We thank people like Ben CHEWEY, who is a young author, and I know he's going to go on to do great things. Because I told Ben when I read his first book, I said, "Man, you got some potential," and I told you to keep in touch with me because I want to do something to help you. And so again, we have this platform, and Ron, I know we're about getting ready to wrap up, and as always, what I do, Ben, is that I give Ron the privilege of taking us out of here. And so he gives us a little recap of what we've done and saying goodnight. So how many minutes do we have?
I'm going to take 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
So the first one now I don't have time to read, but I just like to say this one is rise to freedom. Everything we've been talking about, rise to freedom.
Yes, freedom.
Okay, bring all of that stuff that's stuffed down in the closet someplace that you forgot about.
Please.
Bring it out to the light. And the other thing, too, as we talked about before, this book by Dennis Kimball, I'm sorry, Think and Grow Rich.
Yes.
Our conversation this evening, art of conversation, think and grow rich.
Yes.
Think about what it is you like to do, want to do, didn't do, try to do, can't do, whatever case may be. See, that's a can do.
That's right.
So I just wrote a piece for you. But that's
yeah, and also understand that what you want to do, somebody has done it before you. Okay? James Patterson is considered the greatest author ever. I don't agree with that, but he is prolific, he is productive, and he has the name brand, Stephen King. Stephen King is still writing 300 and 400-page novels, but he's established a brand name. You know, again, whatever you want to do, someone else is doing it. And the thing is with success, success leaves clues. And so this evening, we want you to understand that we have people who are doing what you might say that you want to do. So it's possible. It can be done. Right. And so, again, don't ever say, well, you know what? I want to do this, but I don't know. You know, you'll be surprised. When you get out there and do what you do, you attract people who are doing the same thing.
That's right.
And so, again, we are community writers, fiction writers, poets, and that kind of thing, you know? And I think, we got about 1 or 2 minutes now?
Yes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, let me just read this piece, Rise to Freedom. Actually, it was a couple different things. I'll just read this. Rising to freedom is the cultivation of a seed planted in the mind, body, spirit, and soul of life. From the darkness of despair, time seems to shift in the blink of an eye, wandering from the troubling shades of daily encounters, a condition one must labor through without a breath to spare. Rising to freedom opens up opportunity to appreciate the beauty all around us, as the essence of time enables us to travel and witness all that has been granted. From a seed that has been planted, cultivated, and grown towards the gleaming skies, absorbing radiant energy, wavering with the power of the sun, swaying emotions as time mimics the joy deep within the roots, echoing through the hallways where the budding seed blossoms, spreading the fruits of its labor. Embrace freedom by letting go of the anger associated with a negative mindset of shedding the physical weight that burdens you, a deep traumatic sense of lostness. Instead, aspire to transformative growth and success, becoming a new version of yourself on the path to freedom and springing back to greatness. The life we live is a life that exists deep within the earth core in heavens and curated with undesirable authenticity by the master of meticulously designed you. Marvel at each moment, a huge smile stretch across your features as the camera's flashes reveal the true image of self-reliance, rising without distraction. And the wave of time showcase the true glamour on the front page of Rising Magazine, the #1 bestseller on the New York Stock Market Exchange. With no blemish in sight, only tears of joy, what sparkles like the stars in the galaxy deep in the universe core, rising to freedom.
And so again, this has been Poetically Speaking, the place for the spoken word, with Terry Benjamin and Ronald C. McCray. And our guest this evening has been Ben CHEWEY. Our engineer has been Jeff. And so, again, we will see you on Sunday from 5 to 6 p.m. So, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And good evening.